All right, welcome to part 2 of retouching tools in Photoshop. We've talked about some of the more what I've called smart tools, and those are the tools that the computer kind of tries to figure stuff out for you. And then we talked about the clone stamp, which is kind of like a copy paste. And now we're going to get into what they consider advanced tools that to some degree are almost like painting tools. So for that reason, I'll be honest, I don't use these tools very often because I don't usually have a super practical reason to use them. But I am going to show you a couple of ways that you can do a couple of things. Let's go ahead and look back at what we did in the last session. In here, we actually fixed a few blemishes and we took care of a couple of little places on the door. But as a review, if you want, come back into this one and let's just look on that top corner and let's get rid of the hook that's hanging on the wall. We can use the spot healing brush to do that. Remember, that one is going to be in Photopea. We can't do it on a different layer. Technically in Photoshop, you could check a box and do it, but you're basically going to make your brush just wider than the thing that you're removing. You're just going to kind of paint over this like so, and then let go, and then it should just kind of work its way out of there, right? Good stuff. All right, so we got rid of the hook there. All right, so we talked about using those tools in the last session. Now we're going to get into some different tools. And those, again, are down here. There's these two sections of tools that are together. Blur, sharpen, smudge. I'm going to save smudge for a different picture. Let's just look at blur and sharpen. I've mentioned this before. Blurring is something we can technically do on a smart object with a filter. So I'm going to suggest that unless you're just doing something real quick on a photograph, you probably do it the other way. You're not going to use this tool, but it's there and I got to teach it to you. So the blur tool would in a pinch allow you to blur something. You just can't control how much. Let's go ahead and look at the wedding picture again. Click on the actual layer of the wedding picture and let's zoom up on it. This is actually a picture of a picture. It's a photograph. Notice at the top of it, because I took a picture and there was light coming in the room that's bouncing off of the texture of this photograph, we have some weird little dots in here. So what we could do would be to blur those dots so that we cannot see those pixels because they really almost look like pixels, but really they're just reflections of light. So simply grab your blur tool. It is a brush. Up here at the top, choose a size and of course always go soft. And then what you need to look at, whether you're in Photopea or Photoshop, is the strength indicator. It will be probably set at 50%, but it may not be. And if it's at 100, turn it down. I always start all of these at 50%, which is half strength, which means it's only going to half blur it. And then you can brush over it some more if you want to blur it more. So make sure you clicked on the right layer, take that blur tool, and just brush over gently, gently. Okay, and then let go, and then gently, and then let go again. We don't want to mess up the wall. We don't make the wall blurry as far as like the lines on the wall blurry. We just want to try to blur these pixels out a little bit. So use your brackets to make your brush bigger or smaller. And then we just want to gently blur those out. There we go. That looks much better. And you could go continue on over on the side. So be careful because if you get outside the edges of the picture, it will blur beyond the edges of this picture because we have all of this on separate layers. Ooh, the lights just went out. Oh, back. Okay, so anyway, that's a practical reason to use the blur tool, maybe in an isolated manner such as this. The opposite of the blur tool is the sharpen tool. And I don't generally use the sharpen tool because it just sharpens pixels. It makes pixels more square-y, if you will. Okay, not a really great place to do one of those on here, but let's just pretend, let's click back on the July 4 layer. Let's pretend that her eyes are a little blurry here. And maybe they are kind of, but we're 300%. Everything's going to look blurry at 300%. Let's take that blur tool, or the opposite of the blur tool, the triangle, which is the sharpen tool. Same situation. Technically in Photoshop, it has a sample all layer, so you could do it on another layer, but you cannot do it in Photopea. So I'll just uncheck it. We'll do it destructively. And there's a strength slider. Make sure your strength is turned down to 50%. And then if I click, and I don't want to get the glasses, I just want to get her eyes, in here, it's going to sharpen it up. You're not going to notice it a lot, and then when you do, you're going to be like, oh my, that's too much. Like right now, she's starting to get bags under her eyes from me sharpening these pixels. But you could use a sharpen in such a way. Honestly, about the only really good use for it to me would be like in macro photography. That's like super, super close-up photography where like the features of an insect or something, or even a flower, like you can't quite see the features good enough in there and you want to make those pixely just so they stand out more. So anyway, know that that's what that is. You're probably not going to use the sharpen tool a whole bunch. Okay, smudge tool, coming back to it. But it's just what you think it would be. It's like smudging paint. Also not super useful on photographs. But I will show you a useful way to use it on a mask. Okay, let's go to the next 3 buttons. The dodge tool, the burn tool, and the sponge tool. Okay, the dodge tool, if we click on it, it says range midtones. What it's doing is it is lightening midtones. So you know how we have like highlights and shadows in the middle tones? This is going to do it to the midtones. It's not going to mess with white or black. It's doing the middle tones. In Photopea, I think it automatically is just set to do midtones. I don't even think that you have the option in Photopea, but let's take a look. Let me find my tool here. Here's my dodge tool. Okay, we do. There is a set for, you can change that setting to be something else. So it's set on midtones by default, so you don't accidentally blow out pixels on something else. All right, I'm going to hold down my spacebar here. All right, so what we can do with our dodge is we can use it to lighten things. So if she had like green eyes, but they were kind of dark, we could hit those eyes with it a little bit and it would lighten up those green eyes. Sadly, poor girl, she has brown eyes like me, so we can't do that. What we're going to use it for is to lighten up her teeth a little bit, because in this particular color, there's already a little bit of color cast on this picture because you can tell the white on the shirt doesn't really look all that white, but her teeth could be lighter. So you're going to want to zoom up really close. Take that dodge tool, looks like a lollipop, and just very gently, let's have that exposure at 50%. We don't want to go crazy. We just give it a click on there. Okay. So we're brushing over it. Now, I didn't keep going like crazy, and you're probably thinking, okay, well, that's lighter, but they're still a little bit yellow. You're right, and we're going to fix that in just a second with the next tool. So I'm going to skip the burn tool, but the burn tool darkens pixel. The burn tool, the dodge tool are just opposites. So dodge lightens pixels in the midtones, and if I click on burn, same situations, it darkens pixels in the midtones. It tries not to touch black or white because it knows you don't want to make the black probably darker if you're doing this, and it knows you don't want to take the white and make it whiter than white. So it's set to do the midtones, but you can change it. Okay, that's the burn tool. Again, if you just need to darken something gently, add a shadow a little bit underneath like a chin or something, you could use that a little bit. Okay, I'm going to skip that one and go to the sponge tool. The sponge tool also has a percentage. That's a flow, which again is like the strength of it. And then it has a mode. Pay attention to your mode, okay? Desaturate, saturate. Desaturate, if we desaturate a layer all the way, do you recall what it does? It turns it eventually all grayscale. It desaturates it, no color, okay? Saturate, like amps up the color, okay? And sometimes can be like too much if you saturate all the way, okay? So if we want to get rid of yellow or any kind of color, we desaturate. So we're going to come in here and desaturate this. Again, I don't want to do the whole mouth, just these teeth. So take your bracket keys and make your brush smaller. Oops. And then just come in here and gently, I'm just clicking. I'm not even clicking and dragging. I'm just kind of clicking here and there. Now we're at pixel level. So notice, see, do it a little bit and they're going to kind of turn that gray. Then we can switch back to our dodge tool. There we go. See, now it's looking more white. You don't want to go crazy like some of those people do on their Instagrams. Okay, so let's just make it look kind of normal. But there we go. Okay? And if we were to compare it to the before and after, we would notice this is a much improved image. We've done it subtly. Good photo retouching isn't noticeable. You don't want to know that she had a little red dot somewhere, or you don't want to know that the teeth weren't as white and bright as we're seeing them now. Okay, good retouching is subtle, so just bear that in mind. whenever you turn something into me with a retouch, I'm going to have you turn in the before and the after, because if you did a good job, I shouldn't notice, right? I need the before picture to compare to the after to know what an excellent job that you did. Plain and simple, okay? All right, so that takes care of those. Let's pop over. There's another picture that you can mess around with. Let's open, and don't close this one yet either, but let's open up the other picture in that folder that is the Unit 7SH. This has a picture of Sierra that I want to show you that we'll mess with. Again, another practice if you wanted to do, on teeth or whatever. And then let's look at the other layer of this. I'm just going to turn her layer off, and we're going to look at this hairy layer. All right, remember the smudge tool. Let's take a look at the smudge tool. It's located under the blur tool. It looks like a finger with something underneath it. It looks more like a finger pointing at something in Photoshop. I'm in Photopea right now, and it really does look funny. You can see like the fingernail, and I don't know. It's really odd looking. So I don't really find a lot of uses for the smudge tool in practical use, except on a layer mask. So let's turn off, well, I'm going to hit down Alt and click on this so we can see the layer mask. See how we see those wisps? So if you needed to fake wisps of hair, like say on a fluffy dog where you can't possibly like get it to work, or maybe every time you try to use the refine edge brush or whatever, it's just not looking right, you can fake it. So you can come in here and take your paintbrush, your smudge brush, and then instead of using a paintbrush, you use a smudge brush here and you smudge it. Okay. Now mine's really, really small, so it's kind of hard to see. Let me zoom up so you can see better what's going on. Now remember, I'm only doing this to the actual layer mask. Oh, there we go. I always hate when I do that accidentally. I got all kinds of things happening right now. Okay, there. All right, so I've got my smudge. My strength's at 50, so it's not too crazy. And then there. See how I'm pushing out pixels? See that? It's not like I'm painting. If I took a regular paintbrush, here's what happens. Now I'm on a regular paintbrush. Well, hold on. It's like humongous. So let me get a, oh my. We're like about to freeze up the world here. Okay. Here's a regular 2 paintbrush. Okay, that's a 2. Now I have a 2 smudge brush. See, it's like as you smudge it, you lose pixels. Okay. Like if you finger paint. As you finger paint, little pieces are like you run out of paint, right? That's how smudge works. Okay. And you can't really smudge backwards, but I could take this. I mean, you can, but I would be better to paint with a real paintbrush in black here than to try to smudge this, because that's going to be hard to do. But you could technically smudge a little bit of the black edges in, like on some of these parts if you needed to. Okay. Let me fix this with my regular paintbrush. Now in this picture, it's not really going to help us a whole lot because old Harry here is on a brown background. And we're going to start seeing the background come in there. But hey, we could kind of cheat and click on our Harry layer here, and we could do a little something to get rid of that brown there, right? If it's light, we could come in and maybe burn it a little bit. I could come in here with my burn tool and burn over these edges, and there. Now you can't really even tell that there was brown on that wall, and that hair looks kind of real, right? So anyway, that's a practical use of the smudge tool. It's about the only use I ever use it for, to be perfectly honest, because it's just not really practical on a photograph. I don't usually need to smear pixels around, but if you've retouched something, there might be a reason where you need to zoom up on pixel level and smudge it just a tad. All right, let's go back to the other document and look at the red eye tool. And then we'll take a pause, and then we'll pick back up and finish this off. Let's turn this little girl on over here. I'm still in Photopea, but I'll do this in both. The red eye tool hides underneath your Band-Aid. It's going to be all the way down on the bottom. And basically, the way the red eye tool works in both programs is, it's kind of like using 2 things. It's kind of like taking a sponge and getting rid of the red, and then taking the burn tool and darkening it. It just does it for you, and it does it to red areas. Okay? So, very simply, all you got to do is find your red eye tool. In Photopea, just make the size about the size of the pupil that we need to fix. So I'm going to take my red eye. I'm going to make it about the right size. Of course, you probably should make this soft to some degree. And then just click. Oops, I'm on the wrong layer. That's never good. Okay, and then just click. There we go. And you may have to wiggle your mouse around a little bit if your size wasn't big enough. All right, and that's basically it. So it just basically looks at the red areas that are in the circle, it desaturates it, and it darkens it. That's basically it. And I always have to darken it anyway because it's never dark enough. So you could then follow up with your burn tool and try to darken it up a little bit more so the eyes are actually the color of pupils, right? So that's basically that. Let me go do it in Photoshop just so you can see how it works in Photoshop. Let me get it on the right layer this time in here. Photoshop's is a tiny bit different. Not that it's a big, huge deal. It's just that it has a button for pupil size and a darken amount, which the other one had a percentage too. And you just click on the eye. You don't have to make a brush. And that's it. Same thing though. See, it's still kind of gray to me. I still may want to follow up with a burn over the top of it just to make it darker. That's it. So that's the red eye tool. All right. So that kind of gives you a good rundown of those tools. We're going to do kind of a reinforcement activity using the other picture. So we're finished with this document here. So at this point you could save this one. But we're going to pick up in the next session with this picture. And we're going to use the top image. So have that one ready to go, and then we will resume in just a moment.